Yeah, we're live 7:06 right on the button. Tonight we're going to talk about tune port manifolds. Really, it's more of a conversation about manifolds, but we're talking about one in particular, which will give us an idea how others also work. That's right. We're using one to learn knowledge about many. That's what we do here. That's what makes it so often. So the thumbnail that I have up is an Excel Super Ram originally designed by John Lingenfelter. And if you take a look at it, or if you are familiar with it, if you're not familiar with it, click off and go back to the thumbnail and take a look at it. But this was during the time when the TunePort stuff was very big. And as you know, TunePort fuel injection, that manifold design, that whole EFI system designed for the L98 350 and also the LB9 305, the 5-liter version and the 5.7 liter. If you're metrically inclined, back in the day, that transitioned from basically the carbureted stuff that we were running, the L69, the L82 before that, and then right before that, the Crossfire stuff, the L83 stuff, which was very, very short-lived, only 2 years in the Corvette. But the TunePort stuff ushered in a time when GM started thinking, let's make lots and lots of torque and less horsepower. In fact, if you look at the power rating in the 350, it was 245 horsepower or so. Started out less than that, but they eventually got to 245, but like 345 foot-pounds of torque. So the torque rating was always 90 or 100 foot-pounds more than the power output rating was. It kind of showed you where that thing excelled. And then they kind of changed that when they went to the very shorter, much shorter runner LT1 intake manifold. But in between those two extremes was this Accel Super Ram. They also offered it for the LT1. But the Accel Super Ram had two very important things that were inherent in the design. One of them was that they shortened the runner length. If you look at a TunePort system, it kind of came up. It had the same style cross ram lower intake manifold where the ports would cross over to opposite sides. And then on the factory TPI, they wrapped the tubes up around into a fairly a box kind of common plenum that then they had the front throttle body mounted to it. The thing that made this one different, it had the same type of lower. Their lower actually was a higher flowing unit on the Accel, but also their runners came up and just straight up basically into a much bigger common plenum. So two things happened with that design. One is that the runner length was shorter on their Accel Super Ram, and then the plenum volume was much, much bigger. And so they also would mount, you could mount a stock throttle body on there, on the plenum, but you could also mount much bigger throttle bodies as well, up to and including 50. They had dual 52s, and then they had dual 58 millimeter throttle bodies, which was like, I think the one that I'm showing there in the photo is probably the 1,000 CFM throttle body, which is quite a bit, because we know what kind of power we can make from 1,000 CFM. It's certainly a lot more than any of the TunePort motors would make. But the question for tonight, and this is going to be the poll, which one of those things on the Super Ram was responsible for the power? Or was it something else? Was it the increased plenum volume? Did that have an effect? Or did the change in runner length have an effect? Or that you guys can also make a comment. Was it something else? So the poll for tonight, the plenum volume offered more of a power gain in the Accel. Let's see, the plenum volume offered more of a power gain in the Accel Super Ram. Oh, we're too long. That's why. Let's see, I'm gonna have to change this. We're having to optimize my poll question. Okay. Okay, now I've got it right. The power gain offered by the Accel Super Ram came mostly from the bigger plenum volume. As we saw, you can see it has a much bigger plenum than the factory tune port did. So let's ask our community and see what they have to say. I really like this intake manifold that I'm showing in the thumbnail. The Accel Super Ram worked very well. I had that on one of my first tune port small block Chevy builds that I did way back when I was on staff at All Chevy magazine way back in the day. And I built a 406 stroker. I remember then the editor of All Chevy, Dan Sanchez, he was building because he got to do the high dollar one, because when you're the editor, you get all of the really super cool stuff. He was building a 434-inch all-motor stroker deal for a Camaro that he had. And then I was putting together a 406, but I was using a Vortec supercharger. But they both had Accel Super Rams on them, and I used an Accel Super Ram on that build. And I think airflow research heads on it as well. And I used a mild camshaft. And we ran that one at the dyno facility over at Paul Foff's, which was in Huntington Beach at the time. And after we got it dialed in, thanks to the help of Rick from Pacific Performance back in the day, we ran that and it made good power. I think it was making in the 600s with the, I think we had, I can't remember if it was with the A trim supercharger that I had at the time, or if that was then with the B trim supercharger that I had. We tried, I remember we tried 2 pulleys on it, and it did make pretty decent power, I think, for what we were trying to get done way back in the day. And I liked a Super Ram. The one thing that I didn't like about, and this was, I think, with most of the tune port deals, is that there was an awful lot of there's an awful lot of hardware. There were a lot of bolts associated with getting a tune port set up with the runners and the plenum, and then with the Accel Super Ram with the lid and the throttle body, and getting all of that bolted together seemed like it took about 400 or 500 different fasteners, and they were all usually weird Torx ones. So it was just not, it was not ideal. It took an awful lot. And then if you put it all together and had either a vacuum leak or an O-ring leak, a regulator leak or something, it was an awful lot to take back apart. It wasn't just a simple, 2-piece kind of intake manifold like the Ford stuff was. It was a lot more involved, but it was also very, very cool, and it worked very well. It had lots of power. If you guys want to know how well that intake does and how it compares to a factory tune port, the factory, tune port 350 stuff that was offered by GM back in the day, I have a video up where I tested all of those, with the exception everybody keeps bringing up of the first intake manifold, the company first that makes that a tune port, upgraded tune port manifold setup, and that wasn't available, I don't think, when I ran my test, because I think it was before that company came out, if I remember right. I could be wrong about that. Somebody can remind me what year those things all came out. But I thought that the video that not the video, but the original story that I did on the testing all of the tune port manifolds, because I did the SLP version, I did this one, I did various ported versions of the stock ones. We did SLP. Who else? We did Myron's, TPIS, all of those things, and there's a bunch of stuff there. But I thought that was before the bigger first stuff came out. Well, I could be wrong, so you guys can let me know about that. But that was interesting. I like those tune port manifolds. That I was excited about doing this test because we had a number of different ones, and I was kind of excited to see how the different versions. We had the Holley Stealth Ram. We also ran a carbureted intake manifold kind of as a baseline, like your typical dual plane kind of deal, which, by the way, did very well. We did the Siamese runners because SLP was making the Siamese versions where they merged the two import runners together, effectively changing the runner length and changing other things that are going on there. So it was a very cool test, and it was one of the earlier very big tests that I did where we tested a lot of different things. I did a similar thing with Ford Mustang intake manifolds way back in the day, also for muscle Mustangs and fast Fords. And I also did a very big, elaborate camshaft test where we tested I think 7 or 8 different cams on the same day on a 5-liter Mustang and ran through all of that stuff. So it was an interesting thing. But then I became obsessed with doing all of these huge tests, and a lot of them I shouldn't have done because it was just way more work. Like the ultimate cylinder head test thing that turned out to be, I don't know, 30 different sets of cylinder heads and 4 different motors and all that stuff. It's an awful lot. People don't realize what goes into all of that, especially on that test where we tested not just running the heads and then setting up, building 4 engines, going through all of the different permutations of different valve spring combinations. Because not only did I test them on the dyno, we tested them all on the flow bench. I measured all the spring rates. We did volume measurements on the combustion chambers and all the ports, the intake and exhaust ports. We tested valve spring mass. It was a lot of stuff. And thinking back, I hope that it was helpful for enough people to justify all of that work. It was an awful lot. And it took months and months and months to get it all done. So let's see how our poll is doing. The power gain offered by the Accel Super Ram came mostly from the bigger plenum volume. We've got 52% saying no and 48% saying yes. Greg, your injector size session was very helpful. Thank you. Hopefully the math is fairly simple. So if you just start thinking in terms of let's keep things simple, it's a lot easier, because the thing with injectors is that you can miss by a lot. If you are 25% too much, which is the side that you want error on, if you were 25% too much, you're going to have to tune it anyway when you put bigger injectors in it. So if you're going to tune it anyway, always err on the big side of fuel injectors. So if you're 25% too big or 50% or 100%, that's fine. Just know the math so you can make sure that you're at least that much bigger so that everything will work out. And then that way, when you're that much bigger anyway, and you did your comparison on gas, later on, you're thinking, you know what I need? You know what this motor really needs? You know what every motor really needs is boost. And then I should run E85 in it. And luckily for me, I listened to Richard and made my injectors 100% too big. So now I have a bunch of room to grow in terms of adding boost and or adding E85. Because if you're going to tune it, you can always make the injector flow less fuel. It gets really hard on the other side to make it flow more fuel when it's at 100% and you've already added a whole bunch of fuel pressure. Then it gets harder to get any more fuel flow out. So let's see what you guys got going on. I'm going to scroll back here and see some of the comments. Carlo, looks like I chose the right night not to be late. Yeah, it's all good stuff. Runner length more than anything. I think you're on the right track. The Accel intake manifolds are super expensive now. That's what I'm told. I remember talking to somebody that had sent me a question about a Corvette that he was doing. He was asking about the Accel Super Rams. I think he was commenting on the video that I did and asking me if I still had that intake manifold. And I said, dude, that's from, I don't know, 15 or 20 years ago or whenever we did that test. I said, I don't think that that's still around. He said, oh, you do. Those things are really expensive now. That's what happens. I should have kept all that stuff. I say as I'm shipping out an intake manifold to somebody in Australia. Can I get a 6-liter twin turbo pump gas map from you to get me started? I don't have that. Do you have a Holly setup? Because that's the only thing that I've really tested on. Found you from the 600 horsepower 3800 article. Been wanting to learn more about engines. Good. I'm glad you're here, man. By the way, I did, and it's interesting. I got recognized when I went to the local hardware store because I was getting some stuff to ship out this intake manifold. And I went to the hardware store and somebody walked up and said, "Hey, dude, are you Richard? I recognize the truck." So now my truck is kind of famous. more than likely from the broken transmission. But it was cool, not the getting recognized part, because like that's not important to me. But he said, dude, I watch your stuff and I've learned from it and it's helped me. That's the important part, is if the stuff that I'm doing, if guys benefit from it and it has helped them with their projects, because there are other things that I could be doing on YouTube and have much bigger following and make a lot more money if that was the thing that I was trying to do. Obviously, the not so lucrative world of automotive journalism that I chose should indicate that going down the big money path was not my intention. But helping people with all this information, if it's helped people, that's fantastic. And it did help this guy, so that was fantastic. And if you're here watching, shout out to the guy from Ace Hardware today. Best chat around. That's good. I know everybody just tunes in to hopefully have Lisa here. Putting a breather on to reduce crankcase pressure. Does the PCM send a code? On what application? On a factory thing, you might have a vacuum leak if you're doing that. When we do that, we're not running a sealed system. We're running, I always run a crankcase breather when we're running NA stuff or boosted stuff, because unfortunately the way that the PCV is on factory LS stuff, it's just not enough breathing. Edwin, I think that you asked this comment before, maybe not on the live feed, but I think I remember seeing it on one of the comments. Have you ever tested an Hauser dual port big block Chevy intake manifold? I have not. I don't think Westech, I've never had one, and I don't remember seeing one at Westech. But I would like to. I'd like to do a big dual plane test, and I need to go back and look, because I know that Brule and Freiberger and Dulcich, who are all great guys and have done a lot of testing, I think I remember them doing a dual plane intake shootout, and I thought that they did one on big blocks, and maybe that was part of it. I'll see if I can look up and see if they have data on that. Is it possible to get 400 horsepower from a small block 350? Yes, it is. With the right cylinder heads and camshaft and intake manifold, that's certainly possible. I didn't see the video discussion yet, but from the plenum volume keglet on video, I'm going to say I don't think that you think that it's something else. See? $4,800 to $5,000 harmonics is the biggest wall due to the runner length, I believe. So you think that the runner length on a tune port is limiting it? But what if we change the runner length on the Accel? Barry's in the house. I'm guessing plenum volume has little effect on power, just a guess. I've got a Super Ram, but I need to polish up. What I did on mine, we had it polished, and then what I did was I painted it. I painted it the inset grooves. I painted, because I had painted the block red, so I also painted that lid red, and part of it was polished. The raised port was polished, and part of it was red, and it looked really good when we did that. Whatever color that you pick in there is kind of cool. Let's see. What is the best shape for the plenum? I don't think that makes a difference. It might make more of a difference on a supercharged or turbocharged application if it helps with, let's say, distribution. LB9 with LT1 cam, T56 342s. Do you know what resources would be useful to me? I realized I had a lot of intake runner questions. I know the basic correlation of runner length versus power band, but the rest like runner size increase. and increasing runner diameter from port to plenum, the effects of that. You need to test it. You need to make some adjustable intake manifolds and see what happens. Tapered runners are a good idea. In fact, I think most factory intakes have a tapered runner. And if you look at almost any big block Chevy, small block Chevy, if you look at tunnel rams, those are almost always going to be tapered. Because, you know, the funnel accelerates the airflow. When considering near plug coils, is RPM or horsepower the factor? Actually, you could make an argument that both are. Horsepower would be less of a factor. Usually what you're trying to deal with multiple coils, near the plug is less important than having multiple coils. Multiple coils helps ensure that the problem with a single coil on a multi-cylinder engine is rise time. It takes time for the coil energy for the coil to get saturated. And as RPMs increase, there's less time for that to happen and then for it to discharge again. With multiple coils, that's no longer a problem. And then if you can make your coil, each one of those coils, strong enough to jump the necessary gap, then you can also not worry about misfire. But usually the plug gap has more to do with that than the coil energy. Because when we run factory LS3 coils, for example, if you have too much plug gap, it won't jump that gap. If the dwell is wrong, it won't jump the gap, even though we have multiple coils. But when those things are right, you can make, well, I don't know, we've done 1,500, but I know that you can make more than that. My constraint is having secondary up runner injectors for theoretical boost cooling, so I need long runners, but I like to perform up top, so tapered runner is the idea. You will always have a compromise. So your runner length is going to determine the affected reflective wave. Tapering can help you do that. And tapering is also going to change Helmholtz resonance, because it's going to change the effective volume of the, unless you did it exactly right, where you reduce the lower part of it as much as you increase the upper part of it, and it made it the same precise volume as a non-tapered runner of the same length, which would be kind of unusual, but possible. So that begs the question, what runner diameter is too much? How big is the head? So if the cylinder head is, I don't know, let's say it's 2 inches in cross section or diameter, does it help you to have a 4-inch runner, 4-inch diameter runner? Karlov, if you have a bone stock KA24 and you're running it boosted, you're not going to need, it's going to be, you have lots of cylinder head, which is good. You have variable cam time or VTEC cam timing, which is good, and variable cam timing, at least on one of the cams, which is good. And it's a 24, so you have limited RPM anyway. So you need to think about your RPM range as, I would pick 7,500, let's say, as a max there. I know guys run them higher than that, and we did, but I would say that I would keep that as an effective range. Then you determine your optimum runner length from that RPM range. Carb motor, I went from 450 horsepower to 400, but gained a little under 100 foot-pounds of torque at the crank. Compared to what? I don't know what that comparison is, Bobby. It's a dual port. I don't know what that was in reference to, Edwin. If you run a motor that came factory single coil that was modified to run multiple coils, the 3800 we ran with individual coils, but I think that also had a coil pack on it originally. The 2.2 liter that I've only started it up and run it, but we are running, when we started it up, we ran multiple coils on that because we ran LS coils on it and replaced the factory coil. So that's the way that it will be run on the engine dyno. Eric, I watched the GT40 videos and it didn't show that. I never put how much timing we used on those. I find that I'm skeptical about that. But lucky for you, I have the dyno results right here. Let's see if they're here. 5 liter 305 EFI GT40. So let's look up here. File, test description. Timing is 33 degrees. I like all the comments about taper. you need to test it. I have a 383 built by Lingenfelter and Super Ram back in 1997 with worked over stock heads. 1990 Corvette, 500 horsepower at the flywheel. That's quite a bit. That's a good amount for a 383. Stock TPI is 24.5 from plenum to valve seat. Wow. Super Ram is 21 1/8. Also, the base flow is a lot better. That's one thing that people haven't commented on too much with that they should have. The runners and the lower manifold all flow a lot better on the Accel Super Ram than the stock stuff does. What are you trying to achieve out of reflected wave? Well, the way a reflected wave works is when your downward movement piston is combined with a valve opening, you send a negative pressure wave that travels all the way up through the runner to the common plenum. Something called rarefaction or rarefaction occurs. And what that is you have the negative pressure wave, once it reaches this common plenum, expands out and leaves a big negative pressure area when it does that. And then because there's a negative pressure area and there's a surrounding area of positive pressure, what happens? All the positive pressure flows to the negative area. That sounds a positive pressure wave back down the intake. And what happens is if that pressure wave arrives at the right time, you have additional charge filling, essentially supercharging effect. It's not a flow thing. It's not airflow going in. It provides a supercharging effect, and you need to watch the John Lingenfelter video where he sticks his finger in a clear runner and you can see the waves because his finger is wiggling, because these waves happen more than once. There's a primary wave, a secondary wave, tertiary wave. And what you want to happen is, because as the piston's moving down, it's drawing a lot of airflow in. It's also, when the valve opens, there's positive pressure normally on the backside of the valve from inertial ram, and that helps charge filling. But the charge filling associated with reflected wave happens most effectively when the piston is at or near bottom dead center, when there's very little charge filling taking place, or there's very little draw being sucked in. So you want charge filling happening there where it's least effective. And then you can see that over an RPM range, a given runner length will make that happen. Both the primary and secondary and tertiary waves are adding basically charge filling. They're adding torque, and we see this as a gain in torque. But at some point, that reflected wave no longer arrives at the right time. And then when it does, if you change the runner length and you, because the wave travels at the speed of sound, it goes up and back basically with these things happening at each end. That takes time. So it takes time for that to happen. And what happens is at higher RPM, there isn't time for it to travel the long runner length. So if we shorten the runner length, there's time for it to go up and back and make this happen and then arrive at the right time. The problem is if we shorten the runner length, then it wouldn't be going up and back at the right time and arriving at lower engine speeds, which is why an intake manifold, one of the reasons why an intake manifold, the runner length tunes the effective operating range for the intake manifold. So now that everybody has that, we should be fine. Can you make a video on how to put a 671 blower on an LS with a stock computer and drive-by-wire? Is it possible? If so, how do you make a computer compete with carbs? Is that what you're asking? I don't know about that. I don't know how you'd make that work on a, I don't know how you'd make that work with a factory ECU. That'd be a lot of work. You want fuel to be going into the top of the blower on a 671 blower because you have to actually lubricate the rotors. There has to be fuel flowing through them. You don't want them just drawing air in, not on an old 671. Watch the Gale Banks things when he did that on the diesel and destroyed the blower because there's no lubrication there. So you don't want the injectors going down at the bottom of the blower. You want them going at the top. Trying to run that with a factory ECU would be possible, but it'd be a lot of work. I've run a 671 on an LS, but we ran it with carburetors. Oldsmobile 455 and an 80s Cutlass is a fast car. A 455 is a good start for any kind of thing. My friend built one in the 90s, 129 miles an hour. Is that the like top speed thing that you're talking about? Why did GM start running tapered runners? They didn't start. Almost every runner in a factory intake manifold is probably tapered. So even the carbureted stuff would be like that. Building an engine around a small band of pressure wave tuning is not ideal. Having the resonance synergy occur in a usable RPM range is good, but not the goal. Volume flow is all RPM is. No, just no. There are 3 forms of charge filling associated with an intake manifold design, and I guarantee you that everybody that designs intake manifolds professionally at the highest levels of motorsports knows what they all are and incorporates all of them. And flow is not the only thing. We can have an intake manifold. I can have a short runner intake manifold that flows more than a long runner intake manifold. And the long runner manifold will make more power through 99% of the power curve, sometimes 100%, depending on what RPM range we're running on it in. And even though it flows less, it makes more power. So how does it do that? It does that through these 3 forms of charge filling that have nothing to do with flow. Offenhauser Dewport intake was a cool design. I'll have to take a look at it. Oh, 129 miles an hour on Route 92. Okay. And if you got all that, now tell them how cam overlap figures in. Well, as I told you, the initiation of that reflected wave is caused by what? The opening of the intake valve. And guess what? Similar thing happening on the exhaust side with pressure waves. That's how we get scavenging effects of long tube headers. There's an awful lot going on there. It's really cool stuff. Can you do more on the 90s LT1? I do want to. I want to build that 302 out of the LT1 and the L99. Now my brain is thinking about short runners and individual plenums. Well, if you take a look at, if you go search online, you'll find a lot of this stuff. If you do a search, you'll find that lots of manufacturers have already done dual plenums with dividers because the plenum resonates at different frequencies. That's Helmholtz resonance. They resonate at different frequencies. Porsche does this. Toyota has done this. Ford has done this. Lots of people have done this. And so they run like on a 6-cylinder, for instance, they run 3 of them with one plenum and 3 of them with another plenum. And then at some point they open it and then they run all of them with a undivided plenum. Ford did this on their PI 4.6 2-valve, but only the truck intake manifold. They had a divided plenum, which enhanced torque production way down low. I mean, they were getting their gain at like 2,000 or 2,500 RPM. The cool thing is when they did this, it had very little or almost no effect at any range above that. So it was kind of cool. So those kinds of things are really pretty awesome. Two-stroke expansion chamber, same kind of thing. How wide is the window for pressure wave tuning? Well, if you look at the video that I have up on a long runner and short runner intake manifold and see where the long runner manifold is better, it's thousands of RPM. Before SHO was a dual runner intake, yeah, the Honda or Integra GSR was a dual runner intake. There's been a few of them that also do it with runner, like Porsche did it with dual runners. BMW did a very cool thing with a scroll that was not just a dual runner, but a multiple runner. They changed it from very short to very, very long. And as they're doing it, they're going up. Formula One used to do that. They used to have sliding trumpets. The very famous Mazda 4-rotor Le Mans car had sliding trumpets also. And the cool thing about this is it's not just long works down low and short works up high. It's that, and they used to do this in Formula One, and Mazda did it also. They would slide the trumpets fairly rapidly too, because when we run different lengths, what we see is we'll see kind of a sine wave in the power curve. And then what you want is, and then when we run a slightly shorter, let's say we run 1 inch lower than that, the sine wave will happen at a different frequency, and then those will overlap. And then so ideally what you want is the peaks on all those. So you're sliding the thing up and down. It's really, there's a lot of cool stuff going on there. Installed a Moroso catch can. Is it weird to say the car feels a little faster? Maybe you got rid of some of the crankcase pressure and that could have helped. My 3S GTE out of my MR2 is roughly 14 inches, so that's why I brought it up. Any record amended intake for a 5.7 LT1? Oh, I'm sure that means recommended, right? I'm just putting those two together and trying to figure out what was going on there. The factory LT1 intake is actually very good, and guys have made lots of power with it. But it is very short runner, and it can be made to make a lot more low-speed power than with a different intake manifold. The 90ZR1 had dual runners to increase that. They were changing the effective RPM range. They were trying to enhance torque production for a inherently high RPM kind of motor because it was a 4-valve deal. They also had a 3-blade throttle body that they used, the very tiny primary blade for drivability. Ultra Al, thank you very much, Richard. Best bang for the buck head, targeting 400 to 450 horsepower, small block Chevy. Don't want Vortec iron or expensive. You didn't want a Vortec iron or expensive AFR or no-name Chinese head. Trick flows. Okay, you're limiting yourself. You could get inexpensive AFR heads. They're enforcer heads. That line is inexpensive. The Skip White stuff probably will work pretty well on a small block Chevy. Trick flows will definitely work well on a small block Chevy. What did we use? What did we use on the 305? The Super 23s were our good heads. I don't think I've tried Summit heads, but they're, I'm sure, manufactured by somebody else. I'm sure it's just a private label deal. Change over to the factory LT4 intake, but then you need the LT4 head for that, right? Isn't it a raised port? Carla, that's right. You do need a 3D printer. It's a lot easier to do that. The thing that you have to worry about with 3D printers and intake manifolds is where it attaches to the head. A lot of the 3D printed stuff doesn't like temperature, so you have to worry about that. The Edelbrock CNC heads I'm running are pretty good. I spent $1,600, maybe close to $2,000 today for the pair. What special agent? What heads are those? What is it? A small block, big block, LS? What are they? I have to mention Smoky Unix SY1. Is that a cross RAM or something? Still trying to figure out the 12-port 4.2 liter V6. That's probably a dual port deal, right? That's not unusual. Ford did that on their modular Fords. They had an Emmerich plate that blocks off one of the ports, basically. And so they're running a single port for enhanced torque production, and then they open up the other one for more power. And I think they did that at a fairly low engine speed. Not unusual for other 4-valve stuff to do that as well. So long run are better for drag racing and quarter mile. It depends on what RPM range you're running the motor in. The runner length should be done to suit the effective RPM range that you're running. Usually drag racing is higher engine speed, so typically shorter runners tend to do better there. But lots of guys drag race like a turbo with a factory truck intake manifold and a small camshaft. And because you can make 1,000 horsepower and run it at 6,500 RPM, that's a really good combination. The SHO Taurus motor was developed by Yamaha, yes. Small Chevy 185 Edelbrock E CNC 185 heads. Oh, you're responding. Yeah, that's a good head. Any tips on honing when you guys swap out pistons? Total Steel has some awesome information, but you need an engineering shop. Yeah, they get into it a lot farther than the 95%ers that I'm talking to. What these guys do would be what I do, and that would be either a stone hone or ball hone. If they did it at all, most of these junkyard motors just come out and run the way that they are. A lot of times just taking the piston out, adding ring gap, putting it back in, not honing it at all, and just running boost on it. Like to have a good spot for laser cutting. Yeah, any of those. Laser cutting, water jetting, all of that stuff works to cut out flanges and stuff. And really, everybody should be doing their own porting. I'm kicking myself now for not just running the 3,800 heads that I had already sold to JPL. Now I should have just ran those and finished that Big Bang 3,800 thing long ago. So we're split at 50-50%. I'm surprised, given this channel, that people would be convinced that the bigger plenum volume is what added power. Edwin, is there an email or something I could send you some literature on intake I'm referring to? What did you have a question about an intake or something? But I'll put my email down. You misclicked. Who would win in a race, Speed Racer or Batman? I'm a much bigger fan of Speed Racer than I ever was of Batman. I do like the old Adam West stuff, though. Mostly because I liked Julie Newmar and Eartha Kitt and whoever Batgirl was. Richard, do you think there are gains to be made by porting an A2 head? Yes, there would be. You can make the head better. You can make it flow better. But with what you're doing, I don't know that that would be where I would be looking for power. Does anybody get into the OG C401 motors? The guys from West Tech have one, and I'm trying to get them to run it. I did some stuff with I was there when Rick was doing it from Pacific Performance way back. They got one to run in the 9s way back, but I think that they did a bunch of porting on it, a bunch of extrude coating on the intake, on the headers. What else did they do? I think that they ran some nitrous on it too. Richard has, they were talking about the mileage, how far the LS stuff goes. Richard just took one at 300,000 miles. I've got a 5.3 that's got 304,000 miles. Just took it on a small 4,000 or 400 mile road trip. Mine just went on a 5,000 mile road trip, although the transmission didn't make it. Yvonne Craig, that's who played Batgirl. Oh, very cool. The Hemi boys are picking on your 5.7 95 Caprice. Yeah, that should be pretty easy pickings, I would think, for a late model Hemi. Mexico City's here. Last 5.3 Suburban at 450,000 miles. They should go a long time if you change the oil in them. I know I want to see the ZR1, that original ZR1, that LT5. I want to see that thing run. It's not going to be really impressive because it's going to be like essentially like a stock LS6 did, and not the LS6 big block, the LS6 LS motor. It's because it's rated. I think that this is a 405 horse version and not the 385, which I think was the original one. So it's not going to make a ton of power. It's just cool for what it was at the time. I got to drive one and actually run one at top speed at our top secret test facility. And it was a genuine 180 mile an hour car. Do you think it'd be worth unshrouding the valves on 799 heads? I do. I think it is definitely worthwhile. On 91 octane with an S475 Summit turbo, do you think it's possible to run 800 horsepower with a 5.7 LS1? I don't know on 800 horsepower on 91. Why would you be trying to do it on 91? If you're trying to make that much power, you should put good gas in it. Yes, we do need to do the 292 also. Do you have an opinion on the Kraftwerk supercharger on an LS3? I think that supercharger is, if I remember right, I've done a lot of stuff with the guys from Jackson Racing, and I think that that's Oscar's stuff. I don't think that blower is very big, right? You got 800 horsepower from a 400 Pontiac twin turbo from 2 301 engines is possible. Well, the question isn't whether the turbo will support the power. The question is, can you do 800 horsepower on pump gas? And I suppose you can if you look at not Steve Morris's, but Tom Nelson's stuff. He seems to be getting some pretty big power numbers out of pump gas. We're still working on the 3800 Big Bang. I'm just waiting on the heads and actually some other stuff. Too much compression. It would be a lot easier if the NA motor, at least I think in my head, would be a lot easier if the NA motor made more power and you didn't have to run a lot of boost to do that. What would be a good matchup for Ford versus a 454? Well, the one that I did was a 460, junkyard 460 versus a junkyard 454. In my case, the junkyard 454 made quite a bit more power than the junkyard Ford did. So I think I would have to pick, you'd have to pick the year that you wanted that to happen. And the problem is, it seems to be a little easier to find carbureted junkyard 460s than it is to find the 454s. Because we wanted this, the same kind of starting point. What I wanted was a Gen 6. We could also use a Gen 5 throttle body version, which is not going to make very much power. We could use that versus the equivalent 80s or early 90s Ford fuel-injected version and see how that does. Roger, the LS6 and the LS6 are not the only crossovers for that. GM, way before they used LS1, before the LS1, they used LS5, they used LS4. A lot of those were other designations for other motors. And they've done that with not just the LS stuff, with LT stuff. A lot of their designations are just reused over and over. 3800 I haven't done the big bang on that yet. How much rod wear? Why would the rods be wearing? Good night. Support your local engine builder. So our poll is at 50-50. I'm kind of surprised about that. Again, especially given the Keglidon large plenum volume made no difference video. I normally see 460s in the engine in the wrecking yards when I go over and do my walkthroughs. I see some EFI ones, and I also see carbureted ones. I don't find, although last time I was there, I did see some, we saw some big block Thunderbirds. Whenever I see the T-Birds, I immediately call Mark Sanchez because he's a T-Bird guy. So he can rush over and see if there's any cool parts that he needs. And boats of 460 has 340 horsepower. Yeah, the marine applications, they usually get better camshafts for them. Advanced Engineering West, that's Mark Sanchez. So we'll close out our poll at 50-50. Wow, see? That's why I took a picture of the 100% that we got in the morning. One thing is, not a lot of people are trying to push stock K series on 94 octane E10. I don't think it would have survived, but I put it through with a small turbo. I think that that's true, Karlov. I think that that's a smart way to do it. Since you can't put the power down anyway, you may as well have less back pressure while you're trying to do what you're trying to do. You should try to do everything that you can for intercooling. That's the other side of the Keglidon, how small the plenum can be. Can you make before it hurts? I don't remember if the special agent, if this is the first 50-50 poll, if it's been exactly split like that before. I know that it's been 51-49 in that range. I can't remember a direct 50-50 poll. Karen's anti-EV. I heard Thunderbirds, yay, 70s Thunderbirds, excellent, 429, and a junkyard near my garage. That's what Mark Sanchez is much more of a 429 guy than he is a 460 guy. He likes the 429s. Casey, I'm not sure about Turbo Monza. I'm not sure why he's not here. Yes, that girl did kind of have it going on. Dan, the 429 revs better. That's the theory that people have, is that the smaller motor, you know, likes to rev. Whenever I think about the electric vehicles, the scene that always comes up in my mind is from, what was it? Oh, Aliens 2, the sequel, which I actually liked better than the first one. I love the whole Marines thing and going in and shooting up and not being able to use their guns and all that. I love that's fantastic. But when they were driving the transport and Ripley just like laid into the gas and the tires are spinning, I'm pretty sure that had to be like electric because it was instantaneous. And that whenever I envision EVs, that's what I envision. I envision just like melting the tires because of the immediate torque production. Oh, Lee Merriweather was the other Catwoman, yeah, and Eartha Kitt. $351 Cleveland board, 30 over. Would I need to add ring gap for 150 shot for a budget 500? Well, what ring gap are you putting in there? McLaren P1 probably has short runners because it has the electric motors to do the low end torque. Also great on Barnaby Jones. That's old school. Mrs. Munster. I'm gonna have to go with Morticia Adams. Yes, acid for blood, concentrated acid for blood, something that's never been seen in I don't know how many thousand civilizations. Yeah, you've blown the Tech-Accel. Put her in charge. Would love to support you to test more stuff. Are you thinking of setting up a Fund Me account? Well, we have the super chat stuff that helps, and that's fantastic when people support that. So when I need something, I usually talk to people about that. But I need to get up the Patreon account, which would be good. I've never done a GoFundMe thing though. Isn't that the lady in the old Coors Light commercials? I don't, maybe. What type of oil pump do you recommend for a burnout and an LS53 stock bearings? Probably a stock pump then. Miss Weaver, so cute. I watched a movie recently where she was filmed in a California city a couple of days ago. The movie was called Holes. Yeah, that's with Shia LaBeouf. That's a good one. I like The Poisonous Lizards. There's a lot of good people in that. How much power can a 5-liter get if I flow optimize the oil and coolant passages? You think that's going to help a lot? That's going to help the power a lot? Eric, thank you very much. Let's see, what are some budget-friendly upgrades for an LT1? A 5.7, I'm sure a Gen 2. Cams are your first thing that you should put in there. You should put a camshaft and springs in it. Headers are all obviously good. Michelle Pfeiffer and Halle Berry. Poisonous lizards and guacamole. And what was Kissing Kate was the one in Holes. And the onions, right? That's what they're eating, the big giant onions that were up on top of the mountain. Yeah, they're the CGI ones. They look like bearded lizards though, right? Have you done tests of parasitic loss for high oil pressure? Yeah, the guys at West Tech have done oil pump tests. And in fact, I think that they just did one on an LS, and there's definitely power from oil pressure. Magazine Gen 3 truck kit for sale for $2,500. The good or bad deal is depending on your finances, really, more than anything. That's a decent kit. I mean, it makes good power. I'm seriously trying to secure a private oil well and refinery for years for this project. No funding or intellectual knowledge. So you don't know anything about refining oil or selling oil or making it or making money off of it, but you're all in on it. I am onions make food better. I am a fan of onions. Randy, you didn't see my first comment when I first loaded this video that I have not tested a first intake manifold. What was Zero was the Zeroni, and I think Eartha Kitt was also in Holes. She was Madame Zenobie or something. Got the 6-liter dressed in the LS1's clothing. Good. Recommended head and cam packages. The nice thing about the heads that are on the LT1 is they're pretty good. You can port them and make them better, which you can do that yourself. '69 Lincoln Mark III automatic 460. It needs headers on it, which are always good, and the camshaft is the first thing. We need to start drilling for our own oil, on our own, in groups. I know nothing about drilling for oil. I do have a Milwaukee drill, though, if that will help. Yep, you got to carry Madame Zeroni up the mountain. And there's something about a pig, too, right? I have a 5302 extended cab looking to push 500 horsepower one day. Any recommendations for big street trucks for racing like extended cabs and 4-doors? You need boost. If you're going to try to get 500 horsepower, you need boost. It makes life so much easier, and it adds like lots and lots of torque, which is what you need with a big truck. What movie are we talking about? We're talking about the movie Holes. And what's his name was in that? Who's the head? Not her. Not Sigourney Weaver. Was it John Voight? What's involved with porting the heads? I have 5.7 Vortec and a 99 Tahoe. Well, they're Vortec heads, so they're iron, so it's not going to be a lot of fun. Only seen bits of the movie. It is good. I have kids, so we had watched it many times. Support the LT1 heads and a crane 227 will make about 335 to 340 wheel horsepower with headers. Xenomorphs. Alien Covenant and Prometheus, which neither one of those that I liked very much. And as much as all in as I am on those, on both of those both of those movies, they just didn't do it for me. 99 Tahoe should be LS1. I could be wrong. It will not be a 5.7. If it's a 5.7 in a Tahoe, it's not going to be an LS1 because they didn't have LS1s as 5.7s in Tahoes. It would either be a 5.3 or a 6.0. If it is an LS, it's more than likely a Vortec 350 if it is a 350, if it is a 5.7. Patricia Arquette, she was kissing Kate, that's right. Is it better or cheaper to de-stroke a 6-liter or bore a 5.3? So you want a 327, a 4-inch bore, and a 325 stroke. You won't get that because you have to change both things on the 5.3. You can get a 327 by overboring a 5.3 a little bit, and it will go from a 325 to a 327 if you want the displacement. If you want a 4-inch bore, you either have to start with a 4-inch bore block, which will be a 6-liter, and then put a shorter stroke in it, but it won't be a stock stroke. So can you get a 3.250 stroke is going to be close to a 4.8 stroke, but if you do that, you're just going to be making less power if you do that out of a 6-liter. You can bore a 5.3, but a 5.3 has a 3.622 stroke. You can bore that to 4 inches. I'm told, I've never tried it, but it's going to be pretty thin. Yeah, we start off on motors and start talking about movies. Sure, the Mopar, the guy that lives a quarter mile tie and 70 Charger. Actually, I'm not a big fan of those Chargers. I would much rather have the Challenger or the Barracuda. I like those a lot better. And I am a Mopar guy because I'm actually a Mopar owner. I have a 1985 Omni Jill H. Do you think my 195 liter per hour pump will suffice to run a stock LQ4? Yeah, that's enough pump to run a stock one. What's the difference between a 799 head and a 243? Nothing. They're the same. I believe fuel should be an equal topic as mechanical engineering and building engines. First fuel, then build. So what is it you want to talk about with fuel? We talk about fuel all the time. You should use E85 if you're using boost. That's the extent of our fuel discussion. Chevy should have made the 5.3 a 327 and the 4.8 a 283. What's your experience with aluminum flywheels? We've used them quite a bit. We have aluminum flywheels and drive plates for the dyno, and they definitely make a difference in power. Any recommendation for LS rebuild books? I don't know if I have any good rebuild books up there. I honestly don't think I've ever looked for that. I'd have to take a look and see. Brian, my day was good. 2 more minutes. Can I build a 383 stroker out of a 5.7 Vortec? Yes. But I am banned from the clubhouse. The Honeycomb Hideout. And I so want to go there. Because I remember that Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel are both there. Now somebody can tell me that reference. Charger Challenger and Cuda guys all side-eyed you. It's all right. I'm good. Yep, if you want to build a modern 327, dude, you got to do it. It's going to be a little on the expensive side to get that number rather than you just telling somebody that it is a 327. But if you want to go through that, you can. I want an 8100 supercharger. Does anyone know if I can adapt an LSA supercharger to an 8100? Yeah, you can put it on there. You're going to have to make your own intake manifold, though. Were you ever able to find a junkyard L33? I have one. I've run lots of testing with it already. Mopar or no car until a guy comes in with a K car. And actually, if you were a real Mopar guy, you'd know that a Omni is not a K car. Was that in the new movie Free Guy? No, but that would be a good guess though. There's an advertisement for the second gen Tahoe that listed it as a Geo Chevy Tahoe and said the 325 was a 327. Yeah, that would be okay. That would, probably not accurate. Probably somebody wanting that to be. I'm running a wet nitrous kit on my LT1 at the moment. I believe stock stall is around 2,000. I'm trying to understand the lockout torque. Lockout, your lock up torque converter is something that's going to happen at the top end of the track. Excel Super Ram was really good, but failed miserably when boosted. So what happened when you ran boost in it? Was it leaking or something? I mean, we really had to squinch the bolts and stuff down, but mine ran boost a lot and worked pretty well. You said before, what is the root of your dislike for carb stall EFI conversions? The four-hole throttle body stuff with injectors in them, I've never seen them be consistent, especially under closed loop. We make a run and then we try to make another run and it's different. It did something, and I don't like that. Any plans on doing some 408 LS testing? Boom! We've already done it. There's lots of videos already up on 408 stuff. Oh, it was a joke. I get it. I missed it, but now I get it after you told me. Sir, your honest opinion on how you feel about 2,000 horsepower 70 Impala shredding the pavement. I think it's awesome. I think that's fantastic. What is your favorite winery? I don't drink wine, so I don't really have one. My brother has a winery, so maybe his. But I don't drink any of the wine, so that's not me. I like almost every form of racing. I like airboats and drifting, although to me that's not the same as racing. But all of it shows, guys that are doing it and doing it well. I like watching people do things that have put a lot of time and effort and energy into it and have practiced and do things well. I like watching almost anything. I like watching a badminton competition because it's amazing. All of it's done well. Johnny, you get the points for tonight. And on that note, I'm going to leave. The reference for the Honeycomb Hideout was Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel. It was in Blade 3. And on that note, it's time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up, and everybody that contributed on the super chats. That's fantastic. Thank you. I will be back tomorrow morning, and then I have another video going up on supercharged big blocks, because the only thing better than a big block is a big block under boost. Thank you guys all. I'll see you tomorrow.